Hi, my name is Alain. I'm the CEO of Sylvain. It's a strategy and design consultancy. We're based here in New York. Right now, we're in the fall of 2021, where we're slowly getting back into the office. But if you're curious about our company, check us out at sylvain.co. We do a lot of thought leadership. We speak around the world, and we try to have provocative conversations and discussions with audiences. And we decided to create this space here on YouTube where we can do our favorite talks again. We call it the Second Life series. And we can do it sort of on our own terms. So I'm about to do for you the Exploitation of Purpose, which is a takedown of the concept of purpose and how marketers and brands maybe use the notion of purpose to get in our wallets. Maybe they've weaponized purpose. So I'm about to do that for you. And so here we go. I want to start with a story. I want to start with a story about Dr. John Rock. He was born in 1890 just outside of Boston in Marlborough, Massachusetts. He was the youngest of 5 kids. He grew up in a tremendously devout Catholic family, like so many families outside the Boston area, where he was surrounded with Catholicism and the beliefs therein. He went on to do a lot of public good on his own terms. As he graduated high school, he volunteered in Guatemala. And then he eventually went to Harvard and got a medical degree, and then went on to become a proper gynecologist and obstetrician. He was famous for really working with women of all social classes, women at the bottom of the social strata and women at the top. But he was always a huge supporter as an obstetrician and OBG. He was very, very staunch believer in big families. And of course, in Irish Catholic families are said to be really big. He himself had many grandchildren and many siblings and many children. So he as in his work, he really continued to push forward this idea of growing families. In his work, he explored fertility and increasingly started to become aware of the potential risks of unwanted pregnancies. And what he really began to realize is that women lacked the power to control their own pregnancy on their own terms and control their own bodies. He went on to be the pioneer and key inventor of the birth control pill, along with a couple of others. The birth control pill was unique in that it used a woman's natural hormones and progesterone to actually control ovulation and control pregnancies, which you can only imagine flew in the face of everything that the Catholic Church was trying to do. And the Catholic Church was staunchly opposed to the birth control pill, in fact, going as far as to say it's a natural contraception. So when the FDA approved the birth control pill in 1970, John Rock saw it as an opportunity to convince the Vatican to, in fact, allow and support the birth control pill. He went on a one-man tour around the world. He wrote a book, The Time Has Come, a Catholic doctor's proposal to end the battle over birth control pill. And he became a bit of a celebrity for this opposition, a Catholic doctor who invented the birth control pill. But still, the Pope in 1968, Pope Paul VI made the Catholic Church opposition final by saying there's no way that we will support, we will continue to ban the birth control pill. John Rock lived on for 2 more decades after that decision, dying alone for a heart attack in 1994. This is his actual tombstone. And what really awes me about this story is that his purpose to give women the power to control their bodies in the midst of pregnancy and family planning was greater than his belief in the Catholic Church, this institutionalized religion. Purpose was greater than belief. It was bigger than what people can do. The Catholic Church was nothing but people. So he famously said, always stick to your conscience, your own conscience, let no one ever keep it for you. And I think about this a lot. A great example of this at work is a woman passed him on the street and said, you should be afraid to meet your maker. And he replied, my dear madam, in my faith we are taught that the Lord is with us always. When my time comes, there will be no need for introductions. His purpose and his belief were not in conflict because of who he was. Which gets to the core of this talk, and the core of what we're really trying to say here is thinking about purpose as the reason for which something is done, or the reason for which something is created or exists. For John Rock, it was helping to give women more control of their bodies and their ability to properly care for their children. What does it mean for brands? Purpose is truly imbued and infused in everything we do. It's everywhere we do. It's the reason we do anything. It's the reason we decide we want to reproduce. It's the reason we might take a vacation. It's the thing that we embed in all the things that we create, the tools and the products we make. The story of the Post-it note is nothing but an amazing story about purpose. It's an adhesive that finally found its purpose by placing it in the back of a notepad. But why is purpose so important, and why are we so obsessed with purpose? If we could take a step back and think about human behavior, purpose shapes the human experience. It's through purpose that we form our own identities, maintain our connection to our communities, motivate ourselves to live beyond basic survival. It informs our identity. There's this great story of this parable when one person is asked what they're doing as they're laying brick. The first person says, "I'm laying brick." The second man says, "I'm building a church." But the third man replies, "I'm building a house of God." It's through our behaviors and our commitments and our actions that we're actually asserting a sense of identity. Purpose connects us to community. You might argue that stand culture is a great example of this. Being a member of the Bayhive, Beyonce's Bayhive, not only connects you to Beyonce, but also to the legion of other superfans who go to battle on her behalf. Purpose also gives us reason to live. As humans, we need motivation to do everything, including living. Ultimately, our mortality, knowing that we won't be here forever, gives us a reason to live with intention. Purpose also is essential to our well-being. There's tons of research that shows that when you have a purpose, you can overcome all sorts of psychological problems, or you can drown out negative thoughts. There's literally something like the average person has something like 50,000 thoughts over the course of the day, 80% of which are negative. When you have a purpose, you have the ability to drown out those negative thoughts. So there's this great quote by the Dalai Lama: "Too much self-centered attitude brings isolation. Result, loneliness, fear, anger. The extreme self-centered attitude is the source of suffering. Purpose makes us less self-centered and connects us to the things and ideas that are bigger than ourselves." At the end of the New York City Marathon, you always see people crossing with incredible emotional fanfare, maybe more so than the people that won the whole race. And that's because the boost to the self-esteem is tremendous when you achieve a goal, when you achieve your purpose. Purpose also gives us hope. Multiple studies have found hope to be a critical factor in helping people recover from serious illness or injury. Literally, if you have a sense of purpose, it gives you a sense of hope, and you can actually overcome illness and the neurochemistry in your brain changes so that you can actually recover from pain. In fact, some people say a purpose is equivalent to morphine in the way they can subdue pain. Purpose also has the power to be contagious. Purpose has a way of attracting other people to connect in a sort of hive mind, so you're all looking in the same direction and looking for the same changes. What's interesting is when you look at what happens when you don't have purpose. 39% of former professional footballers surveyed in 2014 reported suffering from anxiety and depression, 13% points higher than current players. So these ex-players no longer had a purpose, so to speak, and that might impact their own mental health. Purpose actually keeps us sane. It keeps us together. The power of purpose is that it gets humans to do anything. We can accomplish so much. We can put a person on the moon, we can finish a marathon, we can build the amazing pyramids. What happens when companies embrace that notion themselves? We're starting to see that, and Tony's Chocolate Lonely is a great example of a company that's really clear on their purpose, created by an investigative reporter, and they're committed to ethical practices and fair labor. A lot of companies are talking about purpose being more important than profit. That purpose is actually, if you are committed to purpose, you can actually drive profit. And there's tons of great examples of this in case studies in recent years. Many years ago, and everyone talked about it, when Colin Kaepernick, he took a knee, Nike famously sponsored him, so almost like he was a professional athlete, and they did this spot. And this spot was fascinating to see its success because it actually moved the needle. People actually started to realize that through purposeful marketing, through a socially driven message, you can actually drive product. And so that's been the mantra of the day in the world of business. Howard Schultz said companies should not have a singular view of profitability. There needs to be a balance between commerce and social responsibility. The companies that are authentic about it will wind up as the companies that make more money. And of course, Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, one of our clients, famously said that when you put a social purpose at the core of your business, it actually will result in better returns. And so for the first time over the past few years, we've seen a connection made between business performance and purpose, and you might even say social responsibility. And it might not be a coincidence. The many people believe that the last few years, CEOs and businesses have had to step up and fill the gaps, missed by government, whether it comes to gun laws or immigration or climate change. Companies and brands are increasingly saving the world. For the first time, we as marketers and we as brand people, we have the capacity to actually impact real societal change through these purpose statements and through purpose. And we've seen it work already. You've seen Airbnb and their commitment to belong anywhere, and really making sure that in the midst of global crises, there's a place for people to go, or Impossible or Beyond Meat, how they are so committed to replicating traditional beef that they'll go through great lengths, study beef at a molecular level, or Fenty, which at the time I presented this, they had just launched, which was the first time we really saw the beginning of this trend, of the inclusive trend, I should say the trend of inclusion in the world of beauty. So that's all cool, and those are all great examples of companies committed to purpose doing cool stuff, but there is a dark side of purpose. There is a side of purpose that is really what troubles me, and that's the part, the heart of this talk, really. For example, I'll give you some great examples. There's pink washing. The asset manager State Street famously had the statue down in Wall Street across from the bull called Fearless Girl, and it was interpreted by many as a bold feminist act. But how many people knew that State Street itself paid a $5 million settlement after allegations of gender pay discrimination, and that their board was overwhelmingly male? Or how about rainbow washing? During Pride Parade here in New York, which is an amazing party, you'll see tons and tons of sponsors, usually and very frequently banks, and selling mortgages and so on. But 73% of same-sex borrowers are less likely to be denied, or more likely to be denied, I should say, for a mortgage. There's a disconnect there, and so maybe by showing up at the parade, it does more than actually committing to same-sex marriage or same-sex borrowers. There's greenwashing. So many cosmetics claim to be all natural in their, or environmentally friendly in their products, but the fact is so many have toxins, so many are problematic, and it's not as clean as it might seem. Or woke washing, the brands that really are trying to take an earnest stand on beliefs. Gillette famously said, "We believe in the best in men." In Gillette, for decades, known purely as a razor company, suddenly had a point of view on on toxic masculinity, on what it means to be a man today. What gives Gillette the right to speak about gender roles in society? It just felt like a really stark disconnect in my view, and maybe used as a marketing tool. Dare we say that brands are weaponizing purpose to actually get in our wallets? And I think they're doing it lazily. The NFL, famously, right after the Colin Kaepernick thing, they signed on Rock Nation, Jay-Z's Rock Nation, to help deal with the organization's own relations to systemic racism. This was, for many, it looked like a symbolic gesture, and for many it looked like weaponizing a stance to help overcome potential negative backlash. All of this, I argue, is a sense of hollow advocacy. Can brands even have a conscience? Is it even possible for a brand to have a conscience? Is it possible for a company to actually, I think about this all the time as a person who owns and runs a company. Does Sylvain actually have a conscience? And their efforts to try to get there, the B Lab that certifies companies for centering social impact in their work is an effort at that. We're a certified B Corporation, and I like to think that that's a reflection of our collective character. But there's some cynics. There's this quote by the famous American economist Milton Friedman. There's one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the risks of the game, the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. That the argument is that companies make money, that's it. There's not, purpose is nice, but purpose might just be a marketing tool, and the purpose of the company is actually to make money. But that's problematic because people are rocking these brands and choosing these brands as extensions of their identity. They're saying, I'm a Nike person, I'm a Google person, I think differently, I'm an Apple person. Brands are personified, they feel like friends. But there's some inconsistencies. So some brands are out there espousing beliefs and purpose statements, but not adhering to them internally in themselves. Burger King was called out by consumers for discussing the importance of mental health, but yet neglecting to pay their employees enough to actually engage in treatment if they needed it. Or you look at Audi, who spent millions on an ad campaign in 2017 about equal pay for equal work, but had no women on their executive team or board until the summer of 2019. One for one policy, which gets gotten a lot of attention. Companies like Tom's, that when you buy one pair of shoes, they'll send another pair of shoes to a community that might need it in a developing country. What's interesting is when that happens, the shoemakers, the local shoemakers in those communities are run out of business. And that's only something we're learning now about the potential perils of the one-for-one model. Purpose doesn't mean ethical. There are a lot of, you could be Burger King or any other company and have a purpose statement. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the right thing. Ethical is sort of a different idea. There are plenty of things in society that had a purpose but weren't ethical. You look at the entire European colonial conquest that had a purpose. The KKK has a purpose for sure. Genocide as a concept, very purposeful. David Hasselhoff and his music career, that had a purpose and was dangerous to the world, if you ask me. Purpose is just used as a concept that people glom onto because maybe it speaks to people's own need for purpose, their own need for meaning. And so you see it everywhere. You see it on magazines, you see it on conferences, you see it on books. So how can we exploit the exploitation of purpose? How can we overcome this notion that purpose is so fleeting and that companies can just latch onto them and promote themselves? To me, it's about commitment. Having a purpose is easy. Committing to it is hard. That's the hard part. Writing down the purpose is one thing, but when you're obsessed or committed to it, that's a whole other thing. Think about John Rock and his journey, which started, we know about the later years of his life, but that journey to create the birth control pill and then defend it and advocate for it is a career that spans 50, 60 years. When we are truly committed to something, we look for all the ways to make it happen, not in spite of our life circumstances, but within them. That's commitment. That's the commitment I'm talking about. It's not just having a purpose, but just so all-consumed with its achievement, with the accomplishment of the purpose, that it occupies everything in the organization. Patagonia gets a lot of credit for being purpose-driven, but it's not so much that they're purposeful as much as, to me, they're driven, and they're committed every day to make this happen. They've committed to giving a percentage of their sales for decades now. Or you look at Ben & Jerry's, that through their supply chain and the idea of linked prosperity, they themselves are committed to being an equitable organization, not just saying it. Or Lego's purpose is to inspire and develop children to think creatively. This idea of play is at the core of the company. They do it and they explore it in everything they do. So what does it look like when a company is made up of everyone that's not only purpose-driven, they're committed to that purpose? What would a company look like if it was full of John Rocks, for example? If you worked at a place right now where everyone was looking in the same direction and equally obsessed with the same idea, what would that look like? Always stick to your own conscience. Let no one keep it for you. That is what I left with when I think about the work we do. Brands shouldn't keep your conscience. Brands shouldn't own and run your conscience. We can't look to brands for guidance on what's right and what's wrong. The beliefs and the purpose can happily coexist within your own heart and your own mind. Because if a young, humble physician can take on the Vatican with that strong sense of conviction, then the possibilities at scale are endless. John Rock showed us that while purpose starts with the individual, when driven by earnest commitment, it can meaningfully change the world. So that was a second life. It's hard to do it a second time, not as easy. But check us out if you have any questions, and we look forward to the next one. Thanks.